Welcome to Move the Chains with Jonathan Rivers on Fox 54, sponsored by Realtree. Here's your host, Jonathan Rivers.
Let there be football. Welcome to Move the Chains. I'm your boy, Jonathan Bam Rivers. The College Football Playoff Committee rankings have become more clear or more unclear. I don't know what they become, actually. I just know a lot of people are upset about them. So I'm not really just going to talk about the specific rankings and give you my thoughts on that, because we'll have plenty of time to do that, and the rankings right now don't matter anyway. But I'll give you some big picture macro thoughts on college football and what I think at this point. In the second down, I've got your social media questions regarding the NFL this week. And in my nonsense narrative, championship windows I think are a real thing. I also think I know why they exist. And the narrative that people create around why they think they exist, to me, it's quite nonsense. So you know I'm going to hit that up. And lastly, the regular season award of the MVP should stay a regular season award, and it should have nothing to do with the playoffs. All that and more right here on Move the Chains. Hey, but you know how we do it. Let's kick it off with first down. All right, so I'm going to show you a graphic to start this, and I'm going to tell you why I think that the AP poll should not exist. So this is the AP poll's preseason top 25. Which they put out every year. All right, you see Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, and Alabama rounding out the top 5 here, and you can see the litany of teams that make this list. Now, the reason I say the top 25 AP poll preseason ranking shouldn't exist is this. You ever watched a court show or been in a courtroom and you've got a prosecuting attorney and you've got a defense attorney, and let's say one of them say something that's erroneous to the judge. And the judge will look at the jury and say, hey, the jury would disregard what was just heard. Well, that sounds good, but in all actuality, the jury can't disregard what they've heard because it's actually been heard. And human nature is going to allow that to go into their memory bank and elicit some type of emotions. Well, I think it's the same thing when it comes to the AP poll, because while we know the AP poll doesn't matter, and while we know it's only the college football playoff rankings that matter, you can't tell me that the college football playoff rankings and the committee members don't look at what teams were ranked preseason and allow that to have some type of determination on where they rank them. That's why if you start in the top 5, like the teams that I just brought up, even if you lose the game, the only team we've seen that hadn't lost a game that's in that top 5 right now is Oregon. It's harder for you to drop back out of the top 10 or out of the top 15 because of where you started. Now, if you lose 4 or 5 games like a Michigan or USC, it doesn't matter where you start preseason because everybody knows you're not that good this year. But the same way it's hard for a team in the top 5 preseason AP poll to drop that far, it's hard for a team outside the top 25 to move up, or even in the top 25 to move up to a top 5 team because of where they started. And if we know that the college football playoff rankings are the only things that matter, why rank anybody anyway until the initial rankings? Because a lot of people, you know what they like to do? They like to retroactively look at a team that's no longer ranked and say that a team that beat them doesn't have a ranked win, even though they beat them when they were ranked. Well, if you're going to have that mindset, which I think is ridiculous, why not just don't rank anybody until the college football playoff rankings and then say, based on the body of work, this is how we're ranking these teams. Do it that way. Now, my second point is I truly believe that brands supersede body of work. And I really want to talk specifically about Georgia, Indiana, and Texas. Now, the University of Georgia, I think, have what's called a warranted brand. Their brand is warranted, which means it's earned. Not only is it earned before Kirby Smart got there as one of the best teams in the country, specifically when Kirby Smart got there, and most definitely in the last 3 seasons where they won 2 out of 3 championships. But even in this year, Georgia has lost on the road to Ole Miss and Alabama. And they've beaten the likes of Clemson, who can win the ACC championship. They've beaten the likes of Texas on the road, who can win the SEC championship. And they've also beaten the Tennessee team, who is one of the best teams in the country. So Georgia's brand is warranted, and yet they're still, number 10 in the college football playoff rankings? So that takes me to a team like Indiana. I think Indiana's brand is absolutely hurting them. Now, do I think Indiana's played the toughest schedule in America? Absolutely not. Am I sitting here trying to champion Indiana that they should be a national championship contender? I'm not. I think they're a very good football team who has beaten the teams that have been in front of them. But if this were Michigan in Indiana's spot, they wouldn't just be a top 5 team. An undefeated Michigan team would be a top 2 team with the same schedule. We saw it last year. The schedule of Indiana last year and Indiana this year and Michigan last year are equivalent. But Indiana doesn't get the same type of cachet that Michigan does because of their brand. And when it comes to Texas, how long have we heard Texas is back? Even before they were back in some people's minds, they were back, right? Well, Texas is number 3 team in the nation right now, I think, because they went to the college football playoff semifinal last year. Because their best win is a win against Vanderbilt. And I'm not saying Vanderbilt's not a good team. It was a ranked win when they beat them. But they don't have better wins, I think, than Tennessee. They don't have better wins than Georgia. They don't have better wins than Ole Miss. But Texas is not leaving the top 5. And it's because the college football landscape thinks Texas is a better team than a lot of these teams based on their talent and based on their brand. And that's why they're there. All right? Let me get to my last point. And because of that, I've got a sound that I want you to hear from Lane Kiffin talking about his team possibly playing in the SEC championship and why he doesn't necessarily want that. Run it, Ernest.
I don't know. I guess I would say, it's changed. The conference championship, could have a big impact both ways for people. So I've talked to other coaches, so I'll just kind of give you the feeling from some other coaches that, they don't want to be in it. The risk to get a bye, the reward to get a bye versus the risk to get knocked out completely. I mean, that's a really big risk, just to get a bye. So
I understand where Lane's coming from. He's worried that the committee will punish a team, specifically Ole Miss, for making the SEC championship game and not winning. I understand that, but what he's doing is he's taking that notion under the assumption that they will be punished. And we know that a college football playoff committee rep has already said that they look at teams who make the conference championship in a greater light. But here's also why I think conference championships shouldn't be discouraging teams. It's because this is the only guarantee that you have of making the college football playoff is winning your conference championship. Ask Notre Dame, I think that's a bad example because I think Notre Dame wants to be independent. But if you win your conference championship game, you're automatically in. So I understand where Lane Kiffin is coming from. And if the committee shows me this year that losing your conference championship game, especially if it's competitive, is detrimental to you, then I understand that mindset. But at this point in time, don't be discouraged by playing in a conference championship game because it's one of the greatest assets you could have, in my estimation. All right, when we come back from the break, it'll be your social media questions. We'll be back with more Move the Chains right after this. Welcome back to Move the Chains. And before we get to your social media questions and second down, I want to take this opportunity, as always, to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, for the opportunity to host Move the Chains. Secondly, shout out to the fans that watch Move the Chains on Fox 54 and that have subscribed to the YouTube channel. Specific shout out to brother Jesse James. I met him last week at a game, and he said he really enjoyed the show, so I appreciate him and everybody else watching. And also to the best production crew in the business. Everything that they do makes the show run, point blank. So once again, shout out to everybody that has anything to do with this show on the back end and who are behind the scenes. Hey, but you know how we do it. It's time for second down. All right, so listen, I love your social media questions because when I post these videos on social media, on my TikTok and YouTube and things of that nature, I love the feedback. I even had somebody call me delusional after my take last week that the NFL wasn't rigged. Now, I know it's not rigged. I truly believe that, but I appreciate him having that mindset because it obviously differs. So always come with it, all right? So the first question this week when it comes to your questions, should the Lions be the Super Bowl favorite? I'm going to surprise some people here and say no. Like, I know everybody thinks that the Lions are the best team in the NFL right now, and I think they're playing as well as anybody. They are tied for the best record in the league with Kansas City. But I think that's the team, in my estimation, that should be the Super Bowl favorite, and that's the Kansas City Chiefs, even after a loss to to Buffalo. I think the Lions are good. I do think that their secondary is susceptible to certain things, but when I look at the Lions, I think the Lions are in a position to right. Everybody has seen what they've done over the past few years, and they've seen the growth, and now they expect them to just be that team. Even with the loss to the Buccaneers at home in week 2, where everybody loses a game, I'm not killing them for that, but I'm also looking at their struggles in the red zone. That can be a blueprint to beat the Detroit Lions. Now, you have to get it done because they've played very well for the duration of this season. But if I were to say my Super Bowl favorites, they would be behind the Kansas City Chiefs simply because I know they have a quarterback and a head coach that have been there and that have done it. The Chiefs have an elite defense, and they're going to be getting some people back when it comes off injury, like a Hollywood Brown and an Isaiah Pacheco. All right, what's my next question? Why have Bo Nix and Jane Daniels been so successful as rookies? I don't think you can underestimate the level of experience that both of these quarterbacks have. Look at the similarities. Both started as true freshmen in college. both transferred to second programs that really highlighted and illuminated their skill sets. And both are far more mature at their walk in life, especially Bo Nix, who's a little bit older, who has more college starts than anybody in history. They're more mature, and ultimately, the organizational development of these quarterbacks has been phenomenal because the teams haven't asked them to be great, and I think that's why they've been so consistent. Bo Nix has one of the best defenses in football, and he's in a position to be successful where Sean Payton can bring him along slowly and not have to ask him to win games. And with Jaden Daniels, Cliff Kingsbury, while I don't think he's a good head coach, has always been a phenomenal offensive coordinator, and they are gelling together. So what they have around them and not having the expectations of having to be great early, I think have allowed them to grow and develop, take care of the football, and make sure their teams are in the playoff picture, which both are right now. All right, the last question, is Josh Allen the MVP? Now listen, I said Josh Allen preseason would be the MVP. So I like being right. Y'all know that. But if you're asking me if he's the MVP right now, the answer is no. And what I don't like is that I don't like that people take one game, the Bills beating the Chiefs here at home last week, and telling me because Josh Allen was able to help the Bills win that game that he's now the MVP. When I look at a Lamar Jackson, and that the Ravens beat the Bills this year and blew the doors off, and Lamar was great in that game. But anyway, when you're looking at a team, even though Lamar's Ravens are 7-4 and the Bills are now 9-2, there is no statistical category that Josh Allen has right now that is better than Lamar Jackson. And in everybody's mind, Lamar Jackson was a presumptive favorite before this past weekend. So because the Ravens lose and the Bills win, now Josh Allen is the favorite, I don't buy it. Again, he can definitely win the MVP this year, and I would love it because it would make me right. But if I had to say he was the MVP right now, I think it would be untrue. Lamar Jackson is still currently, as we stand in my estimation, the MVP for the 2024 season. All right, when we come back from the break, it'll be my nonsense narrative. Championship windows are created by players. Not so fast, my friend. We'll be back and we'll move the chains right after this. And welcome back to the show. It's my favorite segment of the show because I get to go off and I get to be upset. And I get to tell people why I think that their narratives they create are completely nonsense. It's what I do. So let's hit it. It's time for my nonsense narrative. All right, so this is not a narrative that really has my blood boiling like some do, but I think this is just more of an informational type situation because as you can see here, players create championship windows. Now, let me firmly say, first of all, I believe in championship windows. I believe not every team has one, but I believe they exist. But I want to talk specifically about two teams, and that's the Cincinnati Bengals and the San Francisco 49ers. And the reason being is because I don't think players only create championship windows. Both of these teams in the past 5 seasons have had opportunities to go to the Super Bowl and have both been to the Super Bowl. And neither have gotten a chance to get it done. The Bengals lost to the Rams, and the 49ers have lost twice to the Kansas City Chiefs. And the Bengals have been to the AFC Championship game twice in the past 4 or 5 seasons and lost one of those to Kansas City and didn't get a chance to go back to the Super Bowl. So why am I saying that players only don't create championship windows? Well, we all know there's a soundbite of Joe Burrow being asked sometime last year, the year before last, hey, so what's the championship window with the Cincinnati Bengals? And he said, as long as I'm here, our championship window is open. And I think part of that is true because I think having a franchise quarterback, which Joe Burrow is a big portion and a big percentage of what it takes to have a championship window. But it also takes organizational construction, and it also takes organizational competence. And when I look at the Cincinnati Bengals, what are they committed to right now? They weren't committed to keeping Joe Mixon, who was one of the best, not just running backs in the game, but gave you a dynamic in the running game and passing game that you haven't had. He's now in Houston, who is in first place in their division. They didn't commit to a Jesse Bates, who is now with the Atlanta Falcons, who are in first place in their division. They haven't yet committed to a Jamar Chase or a T. Higgins. Jamar Chase is still playing under his rookie contract, and T. Higgins is playing under the franchise tag. They haven't committed to Trey Hendrickson, who might win Defensive Player of the Year this year. So what I'm saying is the only thing they've committed to is Joe Burrow. And while the quarterback is the most important position on the field, if that's the case, you have to make sure that you surround the most important position with the requisite weapons, not just receivers, but also a good defense and an offensive line to protect him, and the Bengals haven't yet committed to that. So what I know is the Bengals may not be able to have that championship window because they're going to lose a lot of their best players. And when it comes to the San Francisco 49ers, you can really look at it as the inverse. The 49ers have paid a bunch of players. They paid Brandon Ayuk. They've paid Deebo Samuel, right? They've paid Trent Williams. They've paid Christian McCaffrey. They're gonna make sure Fred Warner stays in the fold whenever his contract comes up again. But this is a team that has gotten older, and this is a team that have dealt with a myriad of injuries. Now, this is something that's been the MO of the 49ers for a while, guys, dealing with injuries. The 5-5 season that they have right now, if you go back and look at this run under Kyle Shanahan, the majority of their seasons involve injuries and involve them getting in as the 6th seed or close. Now you can be the 7th seed and then making a run in the playoffs. The year they had last year was the outlier in terms of them just being good the entire year because they were healthy. Now, if you're going to pay Brock Purdy, what's going to happen to a lot of the other players because you've already doled out so much money on these contracts and you have a team that is aging. And I firmly believe that a championship window for the Bengals and the 49ers have not just come to a halt, but are closing swiftly, especially when it comes to the 49ers. So players themselves don't create championship windows. You have to have players, but you also have to have an organizational commitment to the right culture to do that. All right, when we come back, it'll be the final segment of the show, which means it'll be time for the final drive. Back with more Move the Chains right after this. And welcome back in, and this is the final segment of the show. So you know what that means. It's time for the final drive. Two-time MVP, reigning MVP Lamar Jackson. People kill him because he hasn't been great in the playoffs like he's been in the regular season. Understand it. But the MVP should stay a regular season award. Now, I think that they should incorporate an award for somebody who's balled out in the playoffs. I think that's warranted in my estimation. But when you have 18 weeks and 17 games in a season, and you've been the best and performed the most consistent for that duration of time, I think the MVP is warranted to you, regardless of how you play in the postseason, which is why I think they should have a separate award for that. But don't tell me that it should include the postseason, because somebody can have a great postseason and done nothing in the 18 weeks of the regular season and then get an award that I really think they truly wouldn't deserve. All right, so you can not only catch Move the Chains right here on the Sports Leader WXTX Fox 54, but you can also catch us on YouTube. Make sure you go to YouTube, subscribe to the channel. It's at Move_the_Chains. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave a comment. All of it is welcomed. All right, for the best production crew in the business, I'm your boy, Jonathan Bam Rivers, and it's been another banger. And as always, until next time, right here on Move the Chains, God bless.